Yeah, so over here doing the right thing.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee is being held in a hybrid meeting format with virtual and in-person participation by members of the public, staff, and council. This meeting is also being live streamed and may be viewed online at ajax.ca/live. A friendly reminder to all participants to please use their microphone at all times for the benefit of those participating in council chambers and joining remotely. I'll now call this meeting to order. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is, and will continue to be, home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We'll move to item 3 on the agenda, the adoption of minutes, the regular meeting of April 3rd, 2023. I have moved by Mayor Collier and seconded by Marilyn Crawford that the minutes of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting held on April 3rd, 2023 be adopted. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Can we please vote? Thank you, and that passes. Item 4, public meeting. Clerk, was there any correspondence submitted for tonight's meeting?
No, Madam Chair, there was not.
Thank you. So we'll move to item 5.1, the presentation reports. The first one is PDS 2023-21, Town of Ajax comments on the proposed provincial planning statement. And I'll ask Director Romanowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll turn it over to Carolyn Murphy to provide council with the presentation on the Town of Ajax comments on the proposed provincial planning policy statement.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Murphy.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and members of the public. My name is Carolyn Murphy, Senior Planner with the town. Tonight, I am here to discuss the town's comments on the proposed provincial planning statement. I will start off with an overview of the Environmental Registry of Ontario postings, a summary of the existing policy framework, and a summary of the proposed policy document while highlighting key changes that staff have comments on. I will then discuss the province's approach to implementation, and lastly, staff's proposed next steps. The province posted ERO bulletins on the review of A Place to Grow, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and the provincial policy statement in October 2022. And subsequently, a review of proposed policies from these documents to form a new provincial planning policy instrument known as a proposed provincial planning statement in April of this year. The province is seeking input on the new document, and although the commenting period was scheduled to conclude tonight, the province has extended the commenting deadline on May 30th to conclude on August 4th. Staff have reviewed the proposed document, and I will provide a summary of the existing policy framework prior to discussing the key changes that are proposed within it. When reviewing development applications, it is important to note that proposals are reviewed for consistency with the policies of the provincial policy statement, conformity with all provincial plans, including the growth plan, conformity with the Region of Durham official plan, and conformity with the Town of Ajax official plan. I will focus more specifically on the PPS and the growth plan, as these are the documents that are proposed to be consolidated and the subject of the current ERO bulletin. The PPS 2020 is a document that provides policy direction on matters of provincial interest related to land use planning and development, guides decisions on land use planning and development, and sets out policies to accommodate an appropriate range and mix of land uses to meet long-term needs by supporting and integrating the principles of strong communities, a clean and healthy environment, and economic growth. A Place to Grow is a growth plan that builds upon the policy foundation provided by the PPS, is a long-term plan outlining the province's vision for building complete communities and appropriately managing growth, provides direction on where and how to grow, including minimum intensification and density targets, issues population and employment projections, and establishes requirements for completing municipal comprehensive reviews, including land needs assessments, settlement area boundary expansions, and employment area conversions. The province is proposing a new document known as the Provincial Planning Statement to replace the in effect PPS and Growth Plan. This new consolidated policy document groups policies under the following 5 themes: generate an appropriate supply of housing, make land available for development, provide infrastructure to support development, balance housing with resources, and implementation. This document consists of new policies, existing policies, and amended policies from both the PPS and the Growth Plan. I will focus on chapters 1 to 4 specifically, as that is where the key changes affecting Ajax exist. Chapter 1 introduced a new defined term, large and fast-growing municipalities, and revised the policy statement's vision to better align with its housing objectives focus. As shown in the list on the left-hand side, the Town of Ajax has been identified as one of the 29 large and fast-growing municipalities in the province, being the same group that were required to prepare municipal housing target pledges earlier this year. Given this status, the town would be subject to the policies within the new document that are specific to large and fast-growing municipalities. Chapter 2 contained the most significant changes, including but not limited to the elimination of mandatory minimum intensification and density targets, except within major transit station areas. These have been instrumental tools in helping to reduce urban sprawl, creating transit-supportive communities, and delivering housing. Broader permissions for residential intensification by allowing conversions of any existing commercial and institutional buildings. With this approach, what is in place to protect these land uses that are also a required component of a complete community? Staff have offered some suggestions within the staff report regarding minimum gross floor area of commercial space and the need to protect institutional uses. The reduction of requirements to permit settlement area boundary expansion. Previously, this could only be considered through a municipal comprehensive review and only when it demonstrated that it met the detailed criteria of the in effect PPS. The proposed document allows for much more flexibility in its criteria, and since it removes the concept of and need for a municipal comprehensive review, there is no longer a means to properly evaluate what the land needs are now and into the future. This also means This also results in allowing employment land conversions at any time and greater potential for negative impacts on the natural heritage system, watershed health, and agricultural areas. Staff disagree with the elimination of the municipal comprehensive review process and removal of detailed criteria to evaluate employment area conversions or settlement area boundary expansions. The requirement for large and fast-growing municipalities to direct growth to strategic growth areas. And lastly, the introduction of a new definition for employment areas, which really scales back what can be included in an employment area, limiting uses to manufacturing, research and development in connection with manufacturing, warehousing goods and movements, and associated retail and office as part of a manufacturing or warehouse operation. The proposed definition may impact the areas within the town that can be protected for what is currently identified as an employment area, which also includes employment support uses such as restaurants and personal service shops. Staff strongly believe that employment areas should continue to allow employment support uses and continue to prohibit residential and sensitive uses. Chapter 3 focused on infrastructure and public service facilities. This chapter remains very similar to the existing PPS, but included additional clarification for the sewage, water, and stormwater related policies, and the most noteworthy change was the introduction of a new approach to school design. An example that was noted as an innovative approach to school design was schools being integrated in high-rise developments in strategic growth areas and other areas with a compact urban form. This was one of the few changes in the new policy document that staff are agreeable to, given that schools are a major component of a complete community. Although some barriers to this design are anticipated, staff support exploring this innovative design option. Chapter 4 included significant changes related to agriculture and cultural heritage. The proposed document provides broader permissions for lot creation by allowing new residential lots in prime agricultural areas, subject to less restrictive criteria than the policies of the in effect PPS. The purpose of the more restrictive criteria in the in effect PPS was to prevent further fragmentation of agricultural areas, to preserve farmland, and reduce land use conflict between agricultural and non-agricultural uses. Staff want to see continued protection of agricultural land and limitations on new lot creation for non-agricultural uses. Staff support the continued application of the Greenbelt Plan policies and that lot creation continue to be prohibited in the Greenbelt Plan area. In terms of cultural heritage, the most significant change was tied to the terminology of what shall be conserved. In the in effect PPS, the policies related to protection were applicable to non-designated heritage properties captured on a municipality's heritage register or inventory, whereas the proposed language only applies to what the province is calling protected heritage property, which generally excludes non-designated properties. Staff do not support this change, as it significantly limits the number and type of heritage properties that must be conserved. Within the proposed document, the province has indicated that as of April 6th, the natural heritage policies and related definitions remain under consideration by the government, and that once they are available for review and comment, they will be made available through a separate ERO posting. To date, this section has not yet been released. As part of the ERO bulletin introducing the proposed provincial planning statement, the province also released a proposed approach to its implementation. As noted in the staff report, this approach discusses the effective date and transition, which is targeted for fall 2023, timing for official plan updates at their ordinary review cycle of every 5 years, Employment area changes, including the change in definition of an area of employment. The province has identified that municipalities would be required to pass time-sensitive official plan updates to take place to align with the new definition. Staff disagree and request that the province continue to protect employment areas from conversion and allow municipalities to re-examine this at the time of their next official plan review. Continued implementation of 2051 forecasts at a minimum. Timing for changes to upper tier planning responsibilities come into effect upon proclamation of Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act, which could occur in winter of 2024 at the earliest. The town has not been contacted by the province to discuss what this change entails. A go-forward approach to provincially significant employment zones. The province proposes not to include provincially significant employment zones in the proposed PPS, but also seeks feedback on the need to identify select provincially significant employment zones for protecting lands that are consistent with the proposed new definition. And lastly, an approach to maintain existing Greenbelt policies. The province has indicated that an amendment is being proposed to the Greenbelt Plan, stating that the previous policy of the growth plan and PPS would continue to apply in the instances where the Greenbelt Plan refers to them. Further details and comments are provided for each category within the staff report as well. In terms of next steps, the commenting period for the ERO posting was recently extended to August 4th. Staff intend on providing the province with Town of Ajax comments and a council resolution following the June 19th council meeting and in advance of the new August 4th deadline. Lastly, staff will continue to monitor the ERO postings for additional postings, including the Natural Heritage Policy section of the proposed provincial planning statement, which is yet to be released. Should this policy section be released and comments due to the province during council recess, staff will provide comments to the province if warranted and report back to council in the fall with either a memo or report dependent on the extent of staff comments. Given the information provided this evening, staff requests that council endorse the comments provided within the staff report and that staff proceed with the next steps that were outlined on the previous slide. That concludes my presentation this evening. Thank you.
Madam Chair, your mic.
Am I on now? Oh, there. Now I'm on. I can hear myself. Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Very interesting. We do have some speakers on the speaker list. We'll start with Mayor Collier. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Murphy. And thank you for your presentation. On page 5 of the report, page 9 of the agenda, we talk about PPS 2023 and proposed broader permissions, including the conversion of existing commercial and institutional buildings for residential use. What would be the process if a developer wanted to convert a commercial building for residential under this new policy?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, given that the proposed document wouldn't have a municipal comprehensive review process, we wouldn't be able to evaluate it through those means anymore. In terms of the exact next steps that would take place for the request, a framework has not been communicated as of yet to the town.
Okay, so would a landowner be able to just submit an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment and ask for that conversion? Is that what you foresee as the process?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, I'd imagine requests would come in through that means as well. I'm not sure exactly what the framework would look like in terms of those requests, since it would still be a true conversion as opposed to just a rezoning application.
Well,
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I can jump in there quickly. So through the chair to Mayor Collier, so in relation to commercial and institutional properties, if it's looking at permitting residential uses and it was in, say, a mixed-use area where those residential uses are permitted, they could be evaluated and looked at under the normal process through a zoning bylaw amendment or an official plan amendment. It would only be in situations where if it was an existing commercial building that might be in an employment area, that could only be considered through that municipal comprehensive review or those other processes. So if it's in an area where residential uses are permitted, they would be entitled to apply to convert those uses.
Well, and that's what I'm asking, Mr. McCullough, is if this new PPS is removing the MCR process, that means conversion applications could come at any time. They wouldn't have to wait for every 5-year MCR process. Am I understanding it correctly?
So through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. I see later on when we talk about agricultural areas in 2.3, settlement area and settlement area boundary expansions. But, you know, as a municipality with a fixed urban boundary surrounded by greenbelt and lake, I don't see any reference to farms. So if a farm was listed as it's an agricultural, but if there was any commercial use, would that also open it up for potential greenbelt properties to apply for conversion?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, as it stands right now, the province has indicated that the Greenbelt Plan policies would still apply. So there wouldn't be potential for lot creation to exist within the Greenbelt Plan area.
Okay. I just know that they all have a residential component. They all have that, what is that 5-acre resident severance, they all do. So,
Through the chair to the mayor, I think you're referring to a retirement lot.
that's it. That's it. We've been dealing with a lot of those at planning at the region. It seems we have 3 or 4 every meeting. So, yeah. With changes reduced at the region now under, I think it's Bill 23, and removing basically regional planning, how would an MCR happen? Would it just be at the municipal level? Would we be responsible for all consultation and consultants and the full cost and the full breadth of the entire process?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, we don't know all the details of what the that process of offloading those responsibilities to the municipal level. We don't know what that entails as of yet. However, the province is proposing the removal of a municipal comprehensive review, and we are firmly providing comments against that removal.
But how would an MCR really differ from a standard OP review? We still do most of the same things, do we not?
Well, through the chair to Mayor Collier, to circle back to your previous question, yes, a municipal comprehensive review could take place at the town level. It wouldn't just be at the regional level. Just recently, it's been a regional level one that has taken place and has recently concluded. In terms of how it differs from an official plan review, the comprehensive review process is looking at everything comprehensively. It's been a crucial tool in terms of us evaluating growth, the land needs, etc. So yes, there's definitely components that are similar to that of a true official plan review process. I'm not sure if my colleagues have anything further to add on that front.
Through Madam Chair to the Mayor, the major difference would be that it wouldn't be a comprehensive review across the region. So the coordination between municipalities in relation to growth, road network, transit and so forth, that would not happen when the municipal comprehensive review happens at strictly at a lower tier level.
Okay, but Ms. Sanders, are those things that we can't sort of add as we go through the regular OP review that we're doing next year? I mean, if we needed to look at certain specific areas, are we not at will to do those through our OP review?
Through our OP review, we look at the areas within our boundary and the areas within our purview and plan for that. I think what Ms. Murphy was trying to explain was that when the municipal comprehensive review happens at the regional level, the coordination between municipalities for whether it be infrastructure or growth allocation, to happen comprehensively across the municipalities. That's what would be missing when you remove the municipal comprehensive review from the region. Municipalities do their official plan reviews at different times, so there may not be the opportunity for the municipalities that are adjacent to each other to undergo these exercises at the same time to have a level of coordination.
Okay. Fair enough. And moving on to page 10 of the report, 10 of the report, 14 of the agenda, just talking about the heritage and the non-designated heritage properties. I think we've done this road a couple times before, and I think this council's made it pretty clear that we are not in support of a non-designated heritage inventory. But I think this is something we're required to have as per the province, is it not?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, do you mean, are we required to have a register, or what
Yeah,
exactly
I mean,
do you
I'm
mean?
not interested in adding another layer of red tape to non-designated heritage properties that are on the interest list of the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, this wouldn't be an addition of red tape, if that's what you'd like to call it. What I was trying to communicate is right now, the in effect PPS gives us the opportunity to evaluate those properties and ensure protection of features and take a look at what the impacts would be to those properties. In terms of the proposed PPS language, the terminology that's been utilized does scale it back to more so designated properties, et cetera.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm thinking about the same thing. So, in the past, from my memory, when we talked about a non-designated heritage inventory, we had a list of, I think, 110 properties that were of interest to the Heritage Advisory Committee because they had the registry. Am I thinking of two different things? The registry and the inventory, are they different?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, essentially they're both form part of the register, but right now we just have designated properties. We don't have non-designated properties on the register, and that's the piece you're referring to.
Okay, so if they were on the register, then instead of just being a 10-day, if they wanted to apply for demolition or something like that, instead of being a 10-day, they would have to go through was it a 60-day or
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe it's 60 days, I believe.
And your comment here, is that different from what was brought forward before? Do you want these non-designated properties to still be subject to any extra limitations, or what is the intent of this not supporting their change?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier. So in this instance, under the current framework, we have the ability to have designated properties and the non-designated properties. We as a town have historically tried to designate properties where the property owner is interested in doing so.
Okay.
Under this new process, or if this new change is going forward, we would probably have to reevaluate what properties are truly important to us as a town and proceed with designation if we really wanted to protect those properties. Because under this change, those are the only properties that would be protected as we move forward. Under the current process, it gives us the ability to review those as development comes forward and work with landowners. But under this new process, if we wanted to ensure the protection of our critical heritage resources, we would have to move forward with designation.
Okay. Those are my questions for now. I do have two amendments, but I'll bring those after everybody's had a chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Next on the speaker list is Regional Councillor Crawford. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, my questions are around the heritage properties also. You said that they outnumber the non-designated, outnumber the designated by 5 to 1. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Crawford, yes, approximately.
And would that be part of the village?
Through Through the chair to Councillor Crawford, we do have a that would be within a heritage conservation district, if that's what you're referring to more specifically.
So so the Heritage District, can you remind me, it went in when I first came here, but can you remind me the area that covers? I know obviously the village, the old Kingston Road, but when you come out onto Highway 2, is that whole area considered to be Heritage District?
So through the chair to Councillor Crawford, I just want to point out, so the 5-1, that's across the province. That's not just here in the town.
Okay, okay.
So it was just to put it into perspective across the province, the potential properties that could be at risk.
Okay,
So these are properties that, if this change went forward, the only way they could be protected is if they're designated.
okay. So the non-designated are because the property owners don't want them designated?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, the non-designated properties is a tool that we have that where we believe properties may have heritage value, and it's just an added step where we can evaluate that before a property is redeveloped. In most cases, in a lot of cases, we get the heritage report, it makes recommendations, and in a lot of cases, it doesn't prevent the property from being redeveloped. We've seen some properties get demolished after, and there's a plaque that is replacing it. There are situations where the property is comprehensively redeveloped, and the certain historical aspects of that property are redeveloped, but they get phased in through the development. The way that the provincial legislation has been changing, it's really tying our hands in our ability to protect these heritage properties. And I will say that heritage...
So protecting them as in if they were to be redeveloped, they're protected so that they're redeveloped to be within the historical genre, or however you like, I'm just trying to understand, what are we protecting? Because I remember touring the registry thinking, okay, the only thing standing is a door and we're trying to protect it. So I have some of the village is beautifully preserved and some of it is looking very tired. And so I'm trying to understand what we're protecting.
And if I may again, I think that's where there's a real misunderstanding as to what we're protecting. Again, the Heritage Register is not a tool where we are going to protect everything and it can't be redeveloped. It is a tool where, like I said, we have had many examples where properties are demolished after they've been evaluated, and it may be replaced with a plaque because it representing what the history is of that area. And there are many other examples where it's the important component is incorporated into the design of the building. And there's lots of those examples around the province, and that's some of the things that we're seeing. So the non-heritage list, inventory, just is a list for us of properties that we would like to look at. It gives us more time to consider it, whether it needs to be designated or not, and whether we think that there's value as a town. Under the new process, we would not be required to preserve those. The only option that if we wanted to preserve a property would be to designate it or make a decision in 10 days. And so those are the rock and the hard place that we're kind of debating. The Register of Non-Designated Properties just gives us more time to consider, do we think this has value in as we move forward? And that's what we feel is the value. Heritage properties are probably the one decision in planning that as a council you will make where there really is no going back. Once a heritage property is demolished, it is lost. And that's where we as staff feel that more time is needed to try and preserve or even just consider the preservation of some of these properties.
So thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Through you, Madam Chair. Has this portion of this report gone through the Heritage Advisory Committee? Or will it?
Through the chair to Councillor Crawford, we did consult our heritage planner on staff. I can't speak to what would have been communicated at the Heritage Committee level, but we did contact the Heritage planner that's on staff.
I mean, we have a Heritage Advisory Committee. I think that it should be sent to the Heritage Advisory Committee for having their comments on record. for what's being done. They may very well actually agree with it, but I would like to be to know that we do have their comments on this. Again, like I can only speak from the village point of view, and many questions around, you know, what is the vision of the village, and you know, the older it becomes, the more tired it looks, and you know, what is our vision for the village, and if it's to improve it, great, but if it's just to have it sit the way it is, it's just going to get more and more tired. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Councillor Rob Tyler Morin. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. Murphy, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. So just so I'm clear on the heritage, I'm the third member of this committee tonight that asked about it. So when I look at the Town of Ajax website right now, there's 5 designations. There's Heritage Register, there's individual designated property, there's Heritage Conservation Districts, non-designated heritage properties, and heritage plaques and markers. So when is this coming? Does anyone know when this is going to the province? Sorry? August? Okay. So in August, assuming this goes back to the province, or this goes to the province, and assuming that this proposal turns into an absolute, will then, when we go on this website and we see it here, will it then just be individual designated properties? Likely, like based on your comments?
So through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin, it would be conservation districts and individually designated properties. The other ones are not, non-designated properties is a category, but again, it's not one that we have currently. And then plaques are just something that we do. It's
Right.
not a designation, it's something we do proactively as an education tool.
Okay. And then it says that there's 31 designated properties, but then it says there's 58 commercial and residential in the Heritage District. So is it 31 or 58? Because it says 31 properties designated, but then it says 58 commercial and residential in the, it's just like a discrepancy of 26.
So through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin, there's 2 types of designations that a property can have.
Right.
Heritage Conservation District, so that would be the ones that are in the village. They're all categorized under one. They all fall under the same designation that are guided by the Heritage Conservation District Plan. And then scattered throughout the town, we have the individual designations, which are more specific to certain properties around the town. So it'd be the cumulative of all of those. But in the village, there's different policies that apply to different properties depending on if it's heritage depending on what the age of the building and whether it's just contributing to the village or if it's an actual heritage
Right.
building within there.
Okay, just on page, I guess it's 15 of the report where it says limitations on heritage protection. That's coming. So I'm just wondering what that's going to look like, assuming this gets passed at the provincial level.
Well,
Okay.
through the chair to Councillor Tyler Warren, I think what Mr. McCullough and Mrs. Murphy have said is that if this goes through, we lose the ability to even have consideration for these potential properties that could be designated.
Right, so that was my,
So, which means if there are properties on this non-designated list that we have that we want to preserve, we'll have to take swift action to preserve those properties.
got it. So that's
Right.
kind of my
Is
first
is
question.
that a fair?
And through the chair, just to clarify, the tools that we have in place will remain as they are. So
Okay.
you still have the ability to add non-designated properties. You can still designate properties. That process doesn't really change. It's just when we start looking at redevelopment, that redevelopment proposal has to comply with this provincial planning statement. And previously, under the provincial policy statement, we were to protect heritage resource assets, kind of everything collectively, whether it was designated or was on a non-designated list. We could still work to protect that if it had heritage value. and it would go through a
Right.
rigorous process to look at.
Okay.
Under this new way, that would no longer.
If council begs my pardon, I mean, an example would be, we have that heritage home that's in the plaza parking lot at the Cineplex,
McKay House Sewer.
right? Okay, pretend it wasn't designated, but we really wanted to keep it. But RioCan was gonna tear it down because they're gonna build a 25-story building there.
Right.
We wouldn't have the ability to do that if we didn't have it listed on a non-designated
Okay.
list and have that ability to have that consideration to determine whether or not we want to keep it or not,
Okay.
right? But it is designated.
Right.
So we don't, so it needs to be preserved or incorporated or something to that effect if those lands are redeveloped.
Okay, and I'll just, thank you for all that. And just one more point. So I sit on the Heritage Committee, I'm the council representative. Marilyn Crawford, or sorry, Regional Councilor Crawford brought up how that committee, as far as I know, in my time, this hasn't been brought up. And this would be a classic council comments. This is the first, I'm gonna talk about this, obviously. The meeting's on Wednesday. So you're saying at that time, that'll be the first time to hear about this? Unless they review the community affairs?
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moore, I think the question was to Mrs. Murphy if whether or not this came forward to the Heritage Advisory. Ms. Murphy, I think, answered that. Our Heritage Planner, Mr. Sawchuk, commented on it. However, Councillor Crawford indicated that it should go to the Heritage Advisory Committee, which we can do if that's council's direction, and we have till August 4th to send the comments out. So there is time
Yeah.
if that's council's direction to do so.
Yeah, I would like that. Then definitely would like to hear their, just their position on it. Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Nancy Henry is next. Go ahead.
Through the chair. So thank you for that explanation, Director Romanowski. I have another scenario, and I just have one question. So let's say you have a property and it is on the list to be reviewed, right? You're looking at potentially making this a heritage property. Currently, right now, let's just say wetlands are big, so let's just throw wetlands in there. It's got wetlands on it, right? Let's pick the hot topic. It's got wetlands on it. Okay, so it's on the list. It's got some wetlands on it. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, it doesn't have any wetlands on it. Between what's currently in place and the new rules, does it change anything as far as it still being designated? Like right now with the current rules, you couldn't, if you saw somebody plowing a field with wetlands and they were doing something to make that field not wetlands in the town of Ajax, can you do, no we're not, Mayor Collier, can you do something to change that? Like if they were to change that land in some way to make it not a wetland, could you intervene at this time and go to that land and say, hey, what are you doing? Like, you can't, you're on our list, you're ready to be looked at. And do you have that capability now? And would you have that capability with the change the province is trying to make?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, I guess, now you said for example, hypothetically, this is a property that is not, it's non-designated with potential heritage potential
Correct.
on a property that has, pardon my pun, natural heritage like a wetland.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I would say firstly, the wetland aside, it would be dealt with unto itself. I don't know the extent of the Heritage Act and what it would require, but the property itself, the building, if that's what is on the non-designated list, if this new PPS goes through, we wouldn't be able to give it any consideration, and it could just be an application, and correct me if I'm wrong, could be submitted for our consideration, and a demolition permit could be submitted and issued within the parameters that the chief building official would have to issue that permit. But if the legislation stays the way it is currently, and we could have that consideration, the ability to consider, as Mr. McCullough said, it may not necessarily mean that that building has to stay there. There could be a review that says, I'll use Councillor Crawford's example, maybe it's just the door that needs to be preserved, right? Well, there's things that could happen through the redevelopment of the lands, whether it's a plaque put on the property to acknowledge or recognize that building or that component, or there could be something designed into the development itself that replicates or emulates that heritage element. So we would work with a developer to try to achieve that. But within the compressed timeline, or the fact that it would be thrown away with this legislation, with this change, then, as I said, we'd have to work swiftly to identify whatever's on our list of what we want to protect, and then take all those appropriate administrative and legislative steps in order to bring something forward to council for their designation, which would take up a lot of resources and time to focus that energy. But if we can deal with it on kind of the existing, within the existing regime, we then have the ability to have a little bit more time to do that consideration, negotiate, work with the developer, even work with the councillors or the mayor, whomever wants to be involved, heritage advisory, etc. So it gives us more flexibility that way. Do you guys want to add anything to that? No?
Okay, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Thank you. I just have, I see Mayor Collier wants to come back in. I'll ask my couple of questions and then I'll call on you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Murphy, for the presentation. Very interesting. I might as well ask a heritage question too. So if these key changes happen, then the town will have to make swift decisions on designating properties on a list of interest to make them designated heritage properties or not. I want to make sure that that's what I just said is actually what you said, or what you said. And then my question would be, the follow-up question would be, so then does that mean that a list of interested properties of interest, we will never be able to have those again? So in the future, if properties come up, that's too bad. We don't have that time or pleasure to evaluate?
Through the chair, in response to your first question regarding the protection of the properties, that is correct, that without the designation, if the new PPS language proceeds, there wouldn't be the same protection ability as it pertains to designated properties, or largely pertains to designated properties, as opposed to previously providing that protection to non-designated as well. And sorry, do you mind repeating your follow-up question?
Sure. My follow-up question is, let's say that does happen and we have this list. So does that mean we would never be able to compile a list of properties of interest that we could at one time designate?
Through the chair, that doesn't mean that the list wouldn't be able to exist, but in terms of the weight that list holds in terms of protection,
Okay.
that wouldn't be, the protection wouldn't exist unless that next step was taken in order to actually formally designate the property.
Okay. So then on a case-by-case development scenario, let's say one of those lists, those properties come up, we wouldn't have the force to preserve because of these changes.
Through the chair, we wouldn't have the ability nor the time to
Okay.
be able to take those necessary steps.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, Madam Chair, recent changes to the provincial legislation puts a timeline as to how quickly we have to designate a property after it's been added to a list. So as Ms. Murphy mentioned, under the new framework, the list of non-designated properties would no longer really matter in terms of their protection. But at the same time, we are on a clock that we have to start designating properties if we do have a list. And we cannot designate a property if it wasn't on that that list of non-designated properties if a development application is submitted. So we wouldn't be able to respond to try and protect a property that way.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. My other question was about the removal of the MCR process. So when the province comes up with these changes and you're evaluating them, do they tell us why? Like, why would they want to get rid of that process? And if they don't tell us, could you speculate? Is that a good question to ask? It's not heritage.
Through the chair, I'm not exactly sure how to respond to that,
Okay.
other than the province has made it clear that they're trying to speed up process. That doesn't mean that these changes will result in a process that has been escalated in terms of its, or expedited in terms of its time. They've put forward a new set of policies or amended policies with the goal of having that. However, we know working at the local level what actually can make these processes more efficient, and we have seen some of these, some of the steps taken, not exactly pan out the way that was expected. Right. So given that we have been the ones to actually evaluate these applications at the local level, we have seen what has worked and hasn't, and what the roadblocks have been that not necessarily align with what the province has put forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Those were my questions. Mayor Collier, would you like to ask some more?
Nope. I have two amendments. I'll do them separately in case councilors want to support one or the other, but not both. Amendment number 1, that council approve the recommendation, save and accept comments respecting, number 1, the municipal comprehensive reviews identified on page 7. And I need a seconder, and I'd just like to speak to it, please.
Do we have a seconder for Mayor Collier's amendment? Regional Councillor Crawford. Okay.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Mayor.
I'll just speak to it. And it was interesting, the comment after your question, Councillor Bauer, just now about the MCR. I've been through 3 of them in my time here, I think, and 2 as a regional councillor. Well, 1 as regional councillor, 1 as mayor. And I think the main reason is time. It's like a 6-year long protracted process that, and quite honestly, in my most recent experience, this one that's just completed, it was the most frustrating because everything we asked for, they did pretty much the exact opposite. We talked about urban boundary settlement expansion, when we talked about densities, when we talked about everything, it didn't matter what Ajax wanted. We talked about flooding, we talked about environmental issues, we talked about hydrology assessments, we talked about all sorts of things, the Carruthers watershed study that was done and ignored. Now Pickering is responsible for implementing the requirements under the Carruthers watershed study for Northeast Pickering. It's just been, to me, and I don't mean any disrespect to the planning profession, but a very, very trying process. And I don't personally, especially now after Bill 23 and them removing most of the regional planning capabilities, or that's not the right word, but input, see that as needed going forward. And again, we're taking the very long reach here that the province will actually listen to our comments and give them any merit whatsoever. I think that is quite the reach. I don't think they're going to really look at this or implement any of these anyway, but I'm not comfortable taking the position that we want to continue the MCR just because of the fact that it's given us good information, I guess, but we're going to be growing out in, 10 years or less. Planning out to 2051 for a municipality with a fixed urban boundary that's going to be grown out in the next 5 to 10 years for the most part, and just having a lot of infill, I don't know is the best use of our time and resources. I'll also, if we're going to have to do it in-house, it is very expensive. When I talked to, and sorry Jeff, I don't want to put money or words in your mouth, but when the region first came out with Bill 23 and we thought that they were going to stop the MCR process, I was told, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we wanted them to continue because it was so resource intensive that we didn't want to have to take on those requirements as a municipality. We wanted the region to finish that work so we'd have it going forward. It's not something I want to see us have to do as, at a municipal level. It's not something I think the province is going to allow the region to continue to do. So I don't think that the wording should be in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Does anyone have any questions? Or Regional Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to the amendment as a seconder? Are there any questions from the other members? I see Councillor Henry. Go ahead.
Through the chair, I would just like to ask staff for a comment on that amendment to Director Romanowski.
Well, I think through the chair to Councillor Henry, our comments have been presented by Ms. Murphy. We think that the MCR process is a valuable tool, not only for the local municipality, but the question about what's the difference between an MCR and an official plan review, and the fact that it provides that broader context within our region. It sets the allocations. It looks at the big infrastructure pieces and roads and the overall look for our regional municipality that we're all a part of. So I think Ms. Murphy summarized her comments exactly the way the planning department wants to provide the comments.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So if I could ask Mayor Collier, I'm not sure I understand. You want to remove the town's opposition to dissolving the MCR because, so explain to me why, and I think the point I misunderstand or don't understand is where you say resources will be spent at the town's level to complete that process.
Okay, I'm just trying to find the section exactly in here, the comment from staff. I think it was on page 5.
Through the chair to Mr. Mayor, I believe you're looking at for page 7 where we comment on the removal.
There it is. Comment, you're correct. Thank you, Mr. Romanowski. Comment, staff disagree with the removal of the MCR. It would be basically to strike that paragraph. And I've read the report and I know staff's, how they feel about this. But having gone through several of these myself and especially the last one, so repeat your question just so I
Thank you. My question is why do you want to strike that? And
okay.
and you made a comment about staff spending time and money doing it in place of the region?
Okay. I guess 3 parts to that. One, I am extremely frustrated with the time it takes to do an MCR. I think it's safe to say it's minimum 5-6 years, and it happens every 5-6 years. And the region was slower than everybody else this time around. I think everybody else was done in 4 or 5 years. Maybe, is there nods? But we took forever. We took so long that when Bill 23 came out, we were worried that they were going to stop the process before it completed. So that's one, just the time. Second, I don't like other municipalities making decisions for us, like scenario 2A and the density targets for the region and the expansion of 9,000 acres of urban boundary settlement expansion across the region, which really is, with the Greenbelt expansion, about 16,000 acres of expansion. These are decisions that are made by other municipalities that affect Ajax, and our opposition was ignored.
Right.
And Councillor Crawford, and if Councillor Dias and Councillor Lee were here, would tell you exactly that as well. Ignored. As well as the hundreds of people that wrote letters, as well as the dozens of people that came and made delegations to the region in opposition, as well as I know of at least 5 environmental groups, including the region's 3 environmental advisory committees, environmental defense, everybody else, all completely ignored. I don't like turning over decision-making outside of us as the elected officials for this town. That's what happened in this last MCR process, when it came to Northeast Pickering and the expansion of the headwaters of the Carothers. And the third one is just what I was told by our planning department, and again, correct me if I misspeak, that if Bill 23 had not allowed the MCR process to complete, we would have had to take that on as a municipality, and it would have been significant cost and effort. So if the next iteration of the MCR in 5 or so years, whenever we do it, falls on the town because Bill 23 has removed basically the planning permissions from the region, I think it's something that we're not going to need to do for a couple of reasons. One, we're going to be near grow-out, because as I said, we have a fixed urban boundary. Just I think through, and I understand what Ms. Endes said about there being different, an OP review and an MCR, but again, I'm not too concerned about the input from the other municipalities and how they affect Ajax. Hope that answers your question.
It does, and it makes me ask another one, meaning, being if there was no MCR, are you saying that none of that opposition and decisions made by the region would have happened?
I don't know the answer to that, because then
Okay.
we have a regional official plan and a town official plan.
Yeah,
And this is the regional official plan. And the town's official plan
Yep.
has to mirror the region's official plan, because they
Right.
trump us and the province trumps the region. So, yeah, I guess if there wasn't the region, is there still gonna be the regional official plan? We don't know, right?
So through the chair, it seems like it's gonna be downloaded to us.
Okay, which is, again, I don't know why we would need to ask other municipalities if it's controlled by us at this point going forward. So,
okay.
Third question?
Well, what I'm having a hard time understanding is we are part of a region, and based on what you're saying, I feel like you are saying, if there's no MCR, then Ajax stands alone, and the rest of the region cannot dictate to Ajax, which I
Correct.
don't think is true.
Well, from a planning perspective, we would still have regional services like police, transit, waste,
Right.
EMS, but from a planning perspective. And that was been changed through the most recent provincial legislation.
Okay, and so maybe
But we
I'll,
don't know exactly what that is yet, because they haven't dropped the other shoe yet.
okay. So maybe I'll go back to planning and say, okay, now hearing what Mayor Collier has said to explain to me why he doesn't want these comments included, and I know you do, is that right? Like, if there's no MCR, then Ajax Planning can just, we're all about Ajax, we don't worry about the region or the rest of the municipalities. And a regional official plan, the region's official plan would be downloaded to Ajax, so there's still a partnership and review that's happening, is there not?
So to you, Madam Chair, so once the region's official plans download to us, we will have control of Ajax. In the report, Ms. Murphy focused on, if you look at previously through municipal comprehensive review, there were requirements that were required for settlement area boundary expansions, for example. This new process significantly reduces what those requirements are. So I think to the comment that, we weren't listened to, looking at this as a comprehensive review across the region, we won't even have a say at the table. We will have the say at Ajax, but in situations where we're looking at settlement area boundary expansions and those kinds of components, those are going to be entirely at the discretion of the local municipality as those requests come in. They're not going to be reviewed together, so you're going to see situations where there could be settlement area boundary expansions happening all over the place. They're not all happening at once. And from a planning perspective, that makes it difficult to plan for servicing at a regional level, looking at that, what those work plans are moving forward. So it moves away from a comprehensive, and I'm trying not to use the word comprehensive, but a collective planning approach to a bit of a haphazard approach and kind of doing it piecemeal.
Okay, thank you for that. Mayor Collier, your name is still lit up. Did you want to talk again?
Just add one point to that we have a fixed it makes no difference to us because we can't expand anyway. That's all.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, that's correct, but I think what Mr. McCullough is saying is we won't be able to even participate in the other discussions for other urban boundary expansions if those detract from our ability to meet our allocation numbers, right? So as you allow other places to expand that maybe shouldn't expand, we wouldn't have a voice at that table to voice our input or have that discussion, because we would be fighting for those allocations as well, whether it's residential, commercial, or whatever settlement areas are expanding outside of Ajax. And you're right, we're a fixed urban boundary. We don't have the ability to do that, but we would have the ability through an MCR process to comment on it and maybe say, you know what, Northeast Pickering probably shouldn't happen in this way or that way, or it should be put off until another review. We won't be able to have that say at that table anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. Great discussion. Are there any other questions for the amendment? Okay. I will ask Councillor Henry for the last comment, and then we will vote.
Just to clarify through the chair, what I'm hearing is even if you make a comment and let's say it was ignored in past times, what you're basically saying is that by striking this from here, this comment, by making this amendment and striking this, we're not even going to get a seat at the table to make the comment. Is that correct?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, so just for clarification, these comments are just back to the province. So it's just for the province's consideration. Under what the province is proposing at this time, this is by no means final, is that there just won't be a municipal comprehensive review. And we know that there's not going to be regional planning, so our decision, we won't have a stake at that decision table. But again, this is just a comment to the province. It's not making any final decisions or anything.
And through the chair, are we the only municipality that is making this comment in the region of Durham?
So through the chair, I haven't seen other municipalities' comments. So again, this was kind of a quick turnaround, these comments, and other municipalities may even be going this evening. So we haven't seen what some of the other comments are. We'd have to take a look at that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Okay, no more questions, and let's vote on the amendment, please. Okay, and the amendment passes. Thank you. Mayor Collier, you had another one?
Even accept comments respecting non-designated heritage properties identified on page 10. And if I get a second, I'd like to speak to it, please.
Is there a seconder, please, for Mayor Collier's? I see Councillor Tyler Moran. Thank you.
Thank you. If at least to get it on the floor. Thank you. Just for council who may not have been here, this goes back over a decade. This is something that we've dealt with in previous councils a few times, and it just keeps raising its head. We've actually taken one, I think maybe two, but I'll say for sure at least one council position where we voted down this non-heritage, this non-designated heritage, what did you call it? Registry. Inventory, whatever it is. We've decided tonight it's the same thing. I think it's the same thing. At least once, I think twice, and my last meeting with Michael Sawchuk, I told him very, very clearly, because right now under the current rules for the non-designated, if a demolition permit comes in, like the one on potentially Kingston Road, that now through Bill 109, it changes the rules anyway. Staff only have 10 days for which to get me to call a special meeting of council to designate the property. And what I told Mr. Sawchuk last time very, very clearly is I am not calling that special meeting to designate the property. So to me, this has no teeth anyway, because I'm just not doing it. So, and a couple of reasons. One, I mean, these, like I said, this goes back over a decade. Council's already decided at least once, we're not interested in this non-designated inventory. And these properties could have been designated over the last decade, and they're not. And I think the original list was like 139, and it was whittled down to about 110 because council pushed back on it, because one of them was the Salvation Army building across the road. I think the other one was the plaza. And we're like, no, we're tearing that. We're rebuilding the plaza. We're not designating that. There was a few others like that that absolutely we were not touching, so they were removed. It was brought down to about 110. I don't remember what it is now, but again, there is not the will of council to do it in the past. There is not the will of the owners to do it. There is obviously now the will of the province to move things forward and cut the red tape. That one property on Kingston Road, we told him to hold off because his application will be better under Bill 23, or is it Bill 109, than if we were to do it today and have to go through the 10-day period and whatever. It's just, to me, not something that we need to deal with anymore. I think this council, not this council, last council and the council before that have already made their decisions on this, and I just don't want to see it come back again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Councillor Tyler Morin.
Thank you. Yeah, so seconding this, obviously, as a Ward 1 councillor, we're in the village. We're in the designated area a lot. We see a lot of these buildings, and I concur with my colleague, Regional Councillor Crawford, that there's basically two types of buildings that we see, not that we're experts, but some that are just beautiful and deserve to be there, and some that are very tired. And that has been going on for a long time, as long as I've been around here. And there hasn't seemed to be moving from the list to the designated, moving from the list to the designated. So yeah, I'll support this, and it's really, my heart is in the village to make sure that we have the best buildings we can and clean up the ones that aren't so great and move on and get the village looking even better and more vibrant than ever. So I'll be supporting.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler Morin. Councillor Henry, go ahead.
I see the mayor's point in this. He's making a very good point. However, I have a little trouble supporting it without it first going through the Heritage Committee, because we haven't even got the comments back from them yet, and we're making amendments to this. So that's my concern there. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Mayor Collier, you wanted to respond.
Just, yeah, I'm sorry, I should have said this when I was speaking to it. This list was prepared with the Heritage Advisory Committee. This is their wish list. This was their wish list way back when. They're like, okay, we have these designated properties, and these are properties that we're interested in. So they have seen it. They saw it 10 years ago when this list was developed. There's been loads of time.
Yes, you can.
So through the chair then, if they've had this list for this 10 years, which I did have knowledge of that, what was the holdup to whoever can answer this for them not designating this? Was it, I'm just gonna ask what the holdup was. I'm not gonna.
So through the chair to Councillor Henry. So as I mentioned earlier, so right now staff, we aim to move forward on one designation per year. But an important step in that is having a willing partner. We can go forward, this council can make decisions to designate properties even if a landowner doesn't want that, but we try to avoid that. So by having the non-designated properties, we're not rushing decisions and potentially impacting a landowner's property at that time, but we try to work with landowners, and that's the largest reason, because we're trying to find willing participants to make sure that we have properties and bringing those forward. So we aim to do one per year, and having that list helps guide us as we move forward through those process each year.
Okay, so follow-up question would be, one per year, that's doesn't seem like a lot. If I'm a landowner and I want to sell to a developer and I've got a good chunk of land and there's something sitting there, what's in it for me to agree with you and designate this heritage? Like, what am I getting out of this when I could be losing? I'm just trying to figure out why it's like, why it would take so long, why there's so many on the list, and what we're losing by agreeing to this amendment here. Because if I was a landowner and I have all this land, I can be making millions and millions of dollars, and I have this potential heritage property. Why am I going to agree with the town of Ajax to designate it heritage? What's the benefit of that?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, if the amendment goes forward, what we're losing as a town is those valuable heritage resources. And we have some buildings in town that are some of the oldest buildings in town that aren't designated at this time because the proposed landowners haven't been at that time willing to go forward. But we've had lots of other examples where landowners, the property may have been in their family for generations. They want to preserve that building. They've worked with developers to sell land around their farm and preserve the house. And there's lots of examples where we've seen that, where the house is preserved and they've made money on selling the land around it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the heritage designation is often, it has a negative view. People view it negatively. But again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of opportunity to continue to preserve what's important, and while still developing it. And those are the most exciting projects that we see around, whether we haven't had lots of examples in the town because we're getting there, but if you look in places like Toronto, there's a lot of really good examples where the heritage resource is being preserved, but they're still building high density around it, over it. There's still that opportunity. So I think it has that negative view, which I think is a misinterpretation of the tool.
And through the chair, is there any type of grants? Like, is there any type of incentives to, if I was on the list, if I owned a property, I'm on this list, is there any type of grants or incentives through that we work through the town that we gain for the heritage property?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, so it's a good question. So in the village, we have the community improvement plan. So a lot of those facade grants are prioritized for heritage properties, and that's how we've been improving a lot of the properties in the village, is through the CIP grants and ensuring that those heritage attributes are preserved.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up, just based through the chair to Councillor Henry, when we have had designated heritage properties surrounded by or in proximity or surrounded by development, we've done a really good job with that. Old Post Inn, Westney House, Post Hill, the name of the house that's in the Home Depot Plaza, McKay House, right? Henderson Place. There's a bunch of heritage designated properties that, Old Post Inn is a great example. We moved the house, right? So when heritage is done right and it's preserved, and it doesn't mean that development can't occur, it just means that it adds to that. And Mr. McCullough also mentioned, like, it is a partnership with the owner of the land. They have to want to designate it as much as we would want to designate it.
Thank you. I'll ask Regional Councillor Crawford to go ahead.
Thank you. The interesting thing that you brought up about Post Hill is that it's not being used for anything at all. And Ajax Municipal Housing has to replace everything that falls apart on it. But there's absolutely no use to it. They're not using it one bit. So, I mean, yeah, we preserved it, but it's at their expense, right? Anyway, that's just my point.
Okay, no other comments or questions I see, so I will ask everyone to vote on the amendment, please. I did. Okay. So the amendment passes? That was it, right, Mayor Collier? Okay, thank you. So we have the main motion moved by Regional Councillor Crawford. Oh. Local Councillor Rob Tyler-Moran, go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's coming up on the, we kind of touched on it. I was just, I need sorry, before I speak to it, I need a seconder.
Is there a seconder? Regional Councillor Crawford.
Just what it says. I just like the Heritage Advisory Committee to, they may know, they may not know about this, and just like them to, as part of our package back to the province, to see comments from that committee.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler-Moran. Are there any questions? Regional Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to it?
I don't know, we have committees, and I think we need to value what their input is, and I think it's important for us to have that on record.
Thank you, and Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I guess, through you to staff, what is the timeline for providing comments to the province?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, the new comment deadline is August 4th.
Okay, so there is time to run this by the Heritage Advisory Committee first.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, that's correct.
Okay, I don't know, like, they're not gonna comment on 99% of it, probably just the one piece, but, okay, as long as there's time. So,
And if I may, Ms. Moore just informed me that this item is on the next Heritage Advisory agenda, so we're already gonna be bringing that, so just so you're aware.
You're done, Mayor Collier? Okay. Councillor Tyler-Moran.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Sarah stole my thing, but it comes through Wednesday, but it's just, good point Mayor Collier is making, that need the comments back ASAP, summer recess, and the rest. Thank you.
Okay, so you're satisfied with the motion as it is, the amendment as it is? I am. Okay. Okay, I'm not gonna ask. Let's vote, please. And that passes. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go back to the main motion as amended. Moved by Regional Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Rob Tyler-Moran, that the items 1, 2, 3, 4, and the amendments. Let's vote. Oh, we're voting. No. What's wrong? That item carries. Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Ms. Murphy. I'm sorry we made you stand there for almost 2 hours. Yeah. We'll move to the next presentation and report, 5.2, PDS 2023-20, Ajax Housing Strategy Final Housing Action Plan. Director Romanescu, do you have comments? For item 5. You want to introduce?
Yes, I'll introduce Joyce Chen, policy planner, here to discuss the housing strategy, and this is the final housing action plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. Welcome, Ms. Chen. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and members of the public. My name is Joyce Chen. I'm a planner in Planning and Development Services. Tonight, I am here to present the Ajax Housing Strategy Final Housing Action Plan. The presentation tonight includes a brief overview of Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Ajax Housing Strategy, an overview of the Final Housing Action Plan, including changes to the draft housing actions that were presented in the Phase 2 report following consultation, and an analysis of impacts from Bill 23, Housing Action Plan Implementation Strategy, measures to monitor and report on the action plan, and next steps. The Ajax Housing Strategy is a two-phase project to help the town to achieve an appropriate range and mix of housing types and tenures to meet the demographic and economic needs of current and future residents. The Phase 1 report, Background Data and Housing Needs Analysis, was endorsed at the June 6, 2022 Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting. The report provided an overview of demographic, housing, and affordability statistics for each neighborhood in Ajax. 11 housing gaps and needs were also identified that have been utilized to guide development of the Housing Action Plan. Housing gaps are presented later in this presentation. The Phase 2 report presented draft housing goals and a draft housing action plan, with 30 actions based on the housing gaps and needs identified in Phase 1. The housing actions were divided into 4 categories. These were policy directions and municipal tools, with actions related to the town's comprehensive official plan review and comprehensive zoning bylaw review. Financial tools, with actions for possible financial incentives the town may be able to provide for affordable housing. Partnerships, with actions where the town can work with other groups and agencies with a role or stake in housing. Education and awareness, with actions intended to provide information, resources, and learning opportunities. A number of housing actions proposed were affected by the Bill 23 More Homes Built Faster Act. These actions were denoted for further review upon the bill's passing on November 28, 2022, and these actions have since been revised. Early consultation with agency and nonprofit stakeholders, Durham Region housing staff, and town committees to help develop the Phase 2 draft housing goals and housing actions was completed in the fall of 2022. The Phase 2 report was presented at the January 9, 2023 Community Affairs Planning Committee meeting. A virtual open house was held on February 8, 2023. The open house was attended by 12 individuals, including members of the community and councilors. Comments on the Phase 2 report closed on April 14, 2023, and during the 90-day comment period, a total of 11 comments were received through email and the Housing Strategy IMO project page. While none of the comments were specific to the housing actions within the Housing Action Plan, the comments received expressed concerns with affordable housing, cost of housing, housing options, intensification, protecting green space, providing and shelter supports, traffic, public transit, scheduling, and business preservation. Responses and staff's comments have been included as attachment 2 of the staff report. Additionally, feedback received from members of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting have been incorporated into the final housing actions. Feedback from residents and stakeholders have also been addressed in the final housing actions. The 11 housing gaps identified along the housing continuum introduced in the Phase 1 report were classified into 4 categories. These were then under non-market housing, affordable housing, market housing, and emerging gaps and opportunities. These 11 gaps have helped to guide the development of the housing goals and actions in the Housing Recommendation Report and Housing Action Plan. The housing goals were developed based on the Phase 1 housing gaps and feedback received from the housing survey and input provided in Phase 2 early stakeholder and committee consultation. The goals have been crafted to cover the entire housing continuum. Goal 1, prioritize safe, affordable, and temporary housing options. Goal 1 focuses on the left side of the continuum with non-market and temporary housing, which includes emergency shelters, transitional housing, and some supportive housing as well as affordable housing. Goal 2, preserve, improve, and expand the supply of rental units. Goal 2 focuses on rental housing, including preserving and increasing the supply of both affordable and market rental units, while also striving to improve the condition of the units. Goal 3, facilitate a balanced mix of housing types and tenures. Goal 3 focuses on the right side of the continuum with both affordable and market ownership housing and aims to balance the supply by providing more types of housing and tenures. Timing for implementation for each of the 30 housing actions is identified in the implementation strategy as ongoing. There are 5 actions with this timing. These are actions that the town will be initiating immediately and are continuous throughout the life of the implementation strategy. Short term, there are 18 actions with this timing. The initiation of these actions is between 1 to 3 years, from 2024 to 2026. Short to medium term, there are 3 actions with this timing. The initiation of these actions could be anywhere from 1 to 6 years, depending on how they fit with departments' work plans. Medium term, there are 3 actions with this timing. The initiation of these actions is between 4 to 6 years, from 2027 to 2029. And long term, there is 1 action with this timing, and the initiation of this action is 7 years plus, from 2030 onwards. Following feedback from Community Affairs and Planning Committee and an assessment of Bill 23 and consultation, several housing actions were revised. The final housing action plan included with the report goes into more detail and identifies how the housing gaps and goals align with each housing action, which town departments will lead and support the implementation of the action, a proposed implementation timeline, and whether additional resources are required to assist in implementing the action. This could include assistance from the Age-Friendly Ajax Steering Committee, consultant services, grant opportunity, and/or in-kind services. All 30 actions, as they are in the final housing action plan, are presented in the table over the next few slides. The actions that were revised after the Phase 2 report was released are highlighted by a red box. Within policy directions and municipal tools, there are 7 changes to the actions from the draft housing action plan. Action 1, through the town's official plan review, add a definition for affordable housing that aligns with regional plans and provincial plans and/or legislation. This action was revised to generalize the level of government the plans would need to align to, rather than naming the specific plans, as they can become outdated. Action 3, through the town's official plan review, examine height and density permissions in intensification areas and along corridors. This is a new action added based on direction from the Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting on January 9th to update densities in certain areas where there is growth potential. Action 8, complete a housing assessment report to facilitate the development of official plan inclusionary zoning policies and an inclusionary zoning bylaw for the protected major transit station area, PMTSA, surrounding the Ajax GO station. This action was revised to also include the development of an inclusionary zoning bylaw as part of the official plan inclusionary policies. Within actions that can be undertaken through the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw review, Action 12 has been modified to provide more detail on the dwelling types permitted for the additional dwelling units introduced by Bill 23. Under municipal tools, Action 16, monitor and track the town's housing inventory by dwelling type and tenure. The wording of this action remained the same, but the implementation timing has changed from short-term to ongoing, where the housing inventory will be monitored at different times for the life of the strategy. Action 17, monitor the town's short-term rental market. This action was moved from partnerships. The town will now be solely responsible for monitoring the town's short-term rental market due to Bill 23 and the removal of the Region's Planning Authority. Action 18, consider reviewing the lodging houses bylaw and associated zoning provisions to identify any challenges or opportunities for shared housing options. The wording for this action remains the same, but the timing has been advanced in the medium term, which was originally set for initiation from 2029 to 2033 and is now from 2027 to 2029, in response to feedback from Community Affairs and Planning Committee at the January 9th meeting. For financial tools, as the town is a lower tier municipality, there is limited ability to provide financial incentives. There is only one action now for this section. This section was updated to remove an action relating to providing financial incentives through community improvement plans due to duplication by Bill 23, exempting development charges for affordable housing, which the financial incentives through community improvement plans would provide. And lastly, under partnerships, Action 21, explore partnership opportunities with Durham Region, local housing agencies, nonprofit agencies, faith groups, institutions, and the development community to deliver affordable and/or alternative housing pilot projects. This has been revised to include additional groups such as nonprofit agencies, faith groups, and institutions, as their roles in housing are crucial. This was also a recommendation at the January 9th Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting to expand the groups that the partnerships could reach. There are 7 actions under education and awareness that are intended to provide information, resources, and learning opportunities. No changes have been made to these actions from the draft in Phase 2. Here we have the remaining education and awareness actions, which also remain unchanged. Next steps. Staff are seeking the adoption of the Ajax Housing Strategy, Final Housing Action Plan, and to proceed with the implementation of the housing actions by aligning work plans and working with other staff and partners. Any action that requires budget will be brought to council for approval, whether through a capital budget or under a separate project report as needed. Every 2 years, staff will report back to council in the form of a status report on the progress of the implementation of the housing actions. The next update to the housing strategy is anticipated to be initiated in 2027 to align with the next census in 2026. Thank you, and this concludes my presentation. Stev, Sean, and myself are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chen. Very interesting. The first speaker on our list is Regional Councillor Crawford. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. Has the provincial government given definitions for affordable and attainable housing yet?
Through the chair to Councillor Crawford, in Bill 23, there is a definition for affordable housing in there.
Which is 10% below market?
No, through the chair to Councillor Crawford, it's for rental, it's 80% of the average market rent for the area.
80% of what? What does that mean?
80% of the amount that's spent of household income that's spent on rent.
So affordable pertains to renting, attainable pertains to buying, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Crawford, attainable is the definition.
I can clarify that through Madam Chair to Councillor Crawford. Affordable pertains to ownership and rental housing. There are different metrics for each of those. There are definitions for affordable. The province has definitions currently in the PPS. There are definitions, as Ms. Chen said, through Bill 23. Attainable has yet to be defined, so we're not certain what attainable means.
Okay. Of course. Because as of April, they had not come up with a definition for affordable. And attainable, my understanding, I was just talking to someone today, attainable was for purchasing. And I think that, personally, I think that there has to be attainable housing or attainable, whatever it is, condo housing, whatever, should be first-time buyers. It can't be investors buying affordable housing out and then selling it out for non-affordable, right? So I think that needs to be defined, and I don't believe they've done that yet, have they? For buying.
For attainable,
Yeah.
no. There are existing definitions for affordable in the current provincial policy statement. CMHC also has definitions for affordable. So definitions do exist that we can use currently.
Does the province recognize it?
It's
Are
in
they
the-
the same
it's-
definition in the bill? In Bill 23?
Through the chair to Councillor Crawford, so the PPS defines affordable housing differently than what Bill 23 defines it
Yeah.
as.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Because the province, I don't think they've defined affordable housing in Bill 23. As of April, they hadn't. And they were asking municipalities to give them a definition.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford. So we're working in a period of transition where they actually have two different definitions. There's the definition in the provincial policy statement, which is a provincial definition, which also aligns with the CMHC definition. And then through Bill 23, actually it may have been Bill 2109, sorry, I'd have to go back, but they introduced the definition for affordable housing, which was different. And as Ms. Chen mentioned, it's 80% of the average market rent or 80% of the average market value or the resale value price. And those are values, and what you may be getting at, it's not the definition that they haven't given, but they haven't released what that average market value is going to be, because that will be released in a bulletin by the province, and then we would have to use that bulletin moving forward once they release that.
So do you not find it kind of interesting that they require any new builds to have affordable housing, and yet there's no definition? Or not, I guess, I'm using definition, I'm throwing that out there as kind of a free-for-all, but as you said, they haven't decided what that market rent is. But yet we're still required to have developers put it into their plan. Isn't that kind of leading the blind? Just saying, making a point. Is it? Nobody wants to lose their job. It's not about losing your job. It's just, it's interesting, right? They say if you want an MZO, you have to have affordable housing, but they don't even know what that is. So you're forcing somebody to do something that.
Through Madam Chair to Councillor Crawford,
a question.
in those situations, you can use the definition of the PPS, or you can use the other definition of affordable, which is 80% of whether it's average market rent or average resale price of a home. And it's just part of the process if you are establishing an agreement for affordable housing in this transition period for a particular development.
Well, that doesn't really mean that we're building houses faster then, are we?
It
I'm just
does-
saying,
it
under
does-
Bill 23 and the definition. It's okay, you don't have to answer that. I noticed that there's a portion of the housing to deal with the homeless. And I think there's a misunderstanding that the housing under Bill 23 is not going to address the homeless situation. The Bill 23 building, whoever, if you don't want to look at me directly, is really only addressing my kids. It's not addressing our homeless situation, and yet the province likes to tie those together, and they don't. So, I'm making everybody wants me to stop talking, but I'm just saying that I think that we have to stop tying the two together because they're very different components of housing. And we've addressed it in this, but we're really not addressing it, if you know what I mean. We're saying, yeah, it needs to be done, but we're not really addressing that situation. And I'm worried because the tolerance of people are getting less and less, and we really need to figure out a way to address this. Anyway, it's not a question. I realize that it's a statement, and I'm just done now.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Crawford. Good statement. Next is Local Councillor Henry. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. So a few points that were brought up in the slide presentation. final housing action plan. Under there, consider reviewing the lodging housing bylaw and associated zoning provisions to identify any changes and opportunities for shared housing options. Could someone on that side speak to that?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry. So with that particular action, because the current, I guess, lodging house bylaw we have is quite dated, we're looking to administer some housekeeping, sort of housekeeping items to that to, you know, not improve, but just to update that bylaw itself. And also because of the new provincial housing, I guess, types and things that have happened, we want to also investigate other, I guess, opportunities to, I guess, in terms of different housing types, not so much for the lodging house portion, but just more of the housing, the sort of the parking standards as well to update that with the lodging houses.
So could I ask you, through the chair, could I ask, when you're saying this update, are you saying that the lodging houses would be allowed in different areas than they are now? And are you saying that you would require less parking availability for a lodging house as long as those who rented agreed not to have vehicles, or is that part of this consideration? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Henry. Currently, lodging houses are permitted in several zones throughout the town right now. It's permitted in our PC zone, our CR zone, all our R1 zones, A to E, and our VC4 zone, which is in our village. As of right now, the parking requirements are quite, I guess, stringent in comparison with the number of lodgers that are permitted. So as part of the review, we would investigate possibly reducing that parking requirement.
And through the chair, how would that play out? I do have a concern with this. In Ward 2, where I've had some issues currently with the current neighbors that are complaining already about what may or may not be a lodging house and the people parking on the street. So the concern I have that will come to me through the residents is, does that mean there will be more parking, that there'll be more vehicles parked on the street from lodging houses? Is that what we're saying? Or we're saying that you don't have to have the requirement for this? What does this mean exactly?
So perhaps I can
Please.
provide some clarification through Madam Chair to Councillor Henry. The parking standards currently for lodging houses are within the licensing bylaw for lodging houses. It is one parking space for two lodging units, 2 parking spaces for the dwelling as a whole. The review of the lodging houses would be done jointly with planning and bylaw services. The zoning component of the lodging houses review, we don't foresee much in the way of changes in terms of the zones in which they're permitted. For the licensing bylaw, as Ms. Chen had noted, one of the requirements that we would look at would be the parking requirements and whether they are too stringent or whether they are appropriate. So currently, we don't have any licensed lodging houses within the town of Ajax. We have over the years received complaints for properties that were suspected to be operating as lodging houses. Now that we have a zoning regime and a licensing regime for those, Bylaw Services has the ability to make that determination and impose the licensing bylaw if they are a lodging house. The parking standards that we currently have in the licensing bylaw are quite high compared to other municipal bylaws and parking requirements for lodging houses.
Interesting. Okay, and my second question through the chair is, I don't know if you're even able to bring up the rest of the slide, final housing action plan. The sentence that says exploring partnership opportunities with Durham Region local housing. And thank you, because I didn't get the rest of that. I can only type so fast. Could you speak to this, number 21 as well, someone on that side? With regards to what this will look like? Local housing agents, non-for-profit agents, faith groups, institutions. What does that look like? Are you referring to, for instance, taking a church and being able to put housing on the church site? Because some church sites are quite large. Is that what we're talking about here?
Oh, I can start. Okay, through the chair to Councillor Henry. With this particular action, if, let's say, a faith group has a property that could, accommodate for additional, if, and they put in an application that they wanted to develop on it, we would work with the faith group and potentially, as a partner to facilitate with them through the process of how that could work.
And would that, through the chair, would that look I'm just trying to see what it could look like, what it might not look like. Could it look like, are you talking like townhomes that are purchased, or are we referring to this as in, let's say a church said, I have a lot of land, I want to help the homeless, I want to build some temporary type style home housing for the homeless. Is that what it looks like?
Yeah, I can address that question. So through Madam Chair to Councillor Henry, it would be for more affordable types of housing that would be managed and administered by the nonprofit or the faith group.
Oh,
We wouldn't be, these partnerships, the goal would be to help these groups develop housing that is affordable, not market rent based. These groups don't have the capacity or the people on staff to go through a development application process. So our partnership with them would be to help usher them through that process and help them navigate that process.
well, that's exciting. That's all I'm going to say to that. That's good news and exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Are there any other questions? Okay, I just have a couple. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Chen. I noticed that there are 6 of the action plans items start with the word consider. So I just want to confirm, does that mean they may not happen? Or like at that time, it will be decided if they'll be acted on?
I can address that question. They will be acted upon as part of either, a lot of them are through the official plan review and through the zoning bylaw review. We are considering them and we're considering how we will implement them. So they will be implemented. What these actions don't say is exactly what that would look like, because that will be evaluated through the process.
Perfect, thank you. And the other question I had is this, I feel like this information is somehow going to be useful in our housing pledge or the 17,000 units that we're supposed to be building, that there's a way to connect all of this great information and ideas with the development community, hopefully somehow, and get some of these things established. And I just wanted to ask, so some of the items like lodging houses, so they have rooms, like the three dwellings potentially on one property, those types of this supportive or transitional housing maybe on faith group land, do those count as units towards the 17,000? Perfect.
Yes, they do.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, and then my last comment about the review, Councillor Henry brought up the review of the lodging house. I actually am looking forward to that review. I know Regional Councillor Dyes and I have talked with planning. So I know it's a medium term, starting in 2027 up to 2029. I'd really like to push and emphasize that you get it in 2027, even sooner if we could. But anyway, those are my questions and comments. Thank you. If there's no other questions, we have the motion moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and seconded by Councillor Henry that the Ajax Housing Strategy Final Housing Action Plan, as provided in Attachment 1, be adopted and that staff proceed to implement the housing actions. I should say, did anyone have questions on the report as well? We're good? Okay, so please let's vote. And that passes. Thank you very much. So we'll move to item 6, the last item, which is the adjournment. We have moved by Mayor Collier, seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford, that the June 5th, 2023 meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee be adjourned. Let's vote. Don't know yet. It passed. Thank you, everybody.